came from Gimli. It's a little bit of a ride. Did you know that the largest film festival in Manitoba takes place there? In Gimli, a community of like 2,000 people? That's amazing. I love movies, and with 94 billion invested in movies and earned around the world, I know a lot of people love movies too. I connected with some filmmakers who are part of the festival to learn what it takes to make a documentary. Let's get into it.
Hi there, I'm Cecilia Araneda, and I am the director of the short film On Archive. On Archive isn't actually screening as part of the Gimli Festival, but it is the award recipient of the Barry Lenk documentary prize. So from Doc Manitoba. So it will have like a special sneak preview or screening or whatever you want to call it at the awards ceremony.
Ooh, that sounds a lot of fun. Awesome. So Ian, tell us a little bit about yourself.
My name is Ian Singh Bawa. I'm a South Asian filmmaker from Winnipeg, Manitoba. I'm one of the two directors of Seeking Fire, which is playing at the Gimli Theatre on the 28th and 29th of July. And I'll let Kwan introduce himself and maybe talk what the actual film's about.
Awesome. All right, Kwan, tell me about it.
Yeah, I'm Kwan Loong, the other director of Seeking Fire, and also co-director of photography on the film as well. It's a feature documentary about people's relationship with money, especially in the fire community or lifestyle, which is short for financial independence, retire early. It's a group of people who try to save and invest and live their life somehow to retire earlier than usual. But through it, we kind of put ourselves in the film and found that it's much more about what you want to do in your life rather than all about the numbers and money.
So this is a very exciting opportunity, seeing these films and like acknowledging films at the Gimli International Film Festival. But let's get into the nitty-gritty of, what it takes to make a documentary. I've already had the opportunity to connect with Catherine Delude. She has a documentary short that'll be showcased there, and it's called "I Would Like to Thank My Body." And she mentioned that as she was, going through this, she got very close to the subjects, and because of that, they were able to work together and collaborate. So she didn't really have a lot of extra footage by the end of it. They were able to just get exactly what they needed every time. For all of you, when you're filming a feature-length documentary, what is sort of your approach, and do you end up with just a ton of footage on the cutting room floor?
It was kind of both our first time working on something of this scope and scale, and certainly length for myself at least. So it was very daunting and very overwhelming to see where we go, what should we film, who do we meet, things like that. But we had a good team with us from Farpoint Films. Our producer, Chris Charney, really helped us navigate the way. And he's also really, really interested in the topic as well. And also our friend Marcus Henkel, who shot the film with us, and that really helped drive us through. And at first we thought it was more about the people and explaining this thing and seeing how their lives are, kind of traditional documentary. But Chris really pushed Ian and I to be in the film more and be the driving force of the story. And so it ended up being a lot about ourselves and our story, and that comes in certain challenge and positive, because then we can shoot whenever we want and work around our schedule. But then also we're always on camera almost. Yeah. And I would direct Ian's scenes and Ian would direct scenes of mine. And we ended up shooting, I think, 30 days, right, Ian? Something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
Which is apparently spot on the producer's guesstimate. And a lot was on the cutting floor for sure. We ended up making it.
What about you, Cecilia? What was the experience like creating your documentary?
Yeah, so my film is short, so it's not a feature film,
Oh,
and
okay.
so I do make a number, like my principal body of work is documentaries, experimental documentaries specifically, and I take the approach of that everything is a personal journey. So kind of like how your producer was telling you guys to make that, and I think it's a very common approach. So how it relates to every film like every particular film is going to be different, how that is personalized. Obviously an experimental documentary is not going to be the same as kind of a more traditionally framed documentary, but the approaches could probably still be very applicable and similar. And so for me, an archive is considering my own cultural history and background and the start of my dad's Alzheimer's journey. So the two things kind of related in my mind to me. In October 2020, something major happened in my home country, which is Chile, where there were a lot of like unprecedented demonstrations that really sorry, it was October 2019. There was unprecedented demonstrations over the increase of the subway fare. And at the same time, globally, there was a lot of unrest. It was just before COVID came. There was unrest in Hong Kong. There was a whole bunch of things happening, which were almost very parallel. And in Chile, it was really unprecedented. And historically, what would happen in South America prior to this was that they would send the military out and kill a bunch of people. But they couldn't. And they also couldn't control this movement because it was a leaderless movement, which when you have nobody to negotiate with, it becomes really difficult. Like, I mean, we saw a snippet of that maybe in Ottawa with a convoy when, but even then there were leaders there that they could pick out. And so that became a little more feasible to manage somehow. But in Chile, it was completely leaderless. So there was nobody to negotiate with, etc. And so the government did send out the military once. And then the military at that point just said, like, we're not civil action. You guys have to get your police together. If you can't figure this out, it's not for us. And quite frankly, the military at that time, I mean, modern military doesn't want to spend their time in jail, so, or in prison, international prison. So I'm sure nowadays, you know, countries would consider it differently, but in the past, that would have been what Chile would have done. And so as it was going through that, I really thought about how the only reason things have changed really, aside from, like, you know, social movements, in that particular case of that, it was just, there was 100,000 cameras everywhere, right? Like, so that the police could not, and the same thing kind of in Hong Kong, perhaps, although that's a whole other political system, but there was like 100,000 cameras on everything. And I was reflecting on the idea of how the social justice movement has really been enabled by the camera over the years, because it's, you know, the act of self-surveillance in a way,
Of
like, you know,
course. Like
the flip
with the
side.
George Floyd situation, right? Like
Yeah.
how many times has a black man been killed that was never on camera?
Yeah, and so that it was a very similar thing that was happening in Chile, and I don't like, it didn't have a clean ending, and the aftermath is very complex, and I'm not going to say that it was like black or white, one side or the other is right,
Hmm.
although one side was more right, I would say. But and so at that moment, I dawned on me, like, you know, that my father was the family photographer, and he had forgotten that he had ever taken any photographs, and yet all of our family archives were of his taking. And so I made this film that connected these two things, occurrences. And Chile is a place of, like, it's not only my birthplace, obviously, it's my dad's birthplace as well.
Hmm.
And so it was really important for me to contextualize the coming to Canada and the process of understanding how, you know, these things, histories will repeat themselves over and over again, but for the active witness that the camera does. And so I kind of wanted to pull that all together. It's a process-based film. It wasn't really a cleanly um,
Hmm.
a linear film. It has like a beginning, a middle, and an end, and I won't say that it doesn't, but it's not an expected film anyways. And certainly I will
Well,
say,
there's the
like,
experimental part to it, right?
yeah, there's a lot of found footage. I talk a bit about the history of Chile, and I also, um, you know, it's challenging for, I guess, a Canadian audience. It's an immigrant experience film in a way, but it also talks about a lot about Chile's political history, which may or may not mirror other political histories for immigrant experiences as well. And so in a way, it's the story of me coming to terms with my father's Alzheimer's as well. And I think a lot of people actually can relate to that. If it's not Alzheimer's, it's something else as well.
As Cecilia was mentioning, sometimes it's a little messy when you're putting a story together, and especially for life, it isn't a cohesive narrative necessarily. So, how did you and Kwan tackle your story? How did you find that you were talking a little bit about how your producer told you to put the camera on yourself and the story of yourself, but how do you develop that story and concept into that final product?
Well, we I think naturally just had a bunch of stuff going on in our lives. Quan and I are about just like 12 years apart, but we're good friends, and we're Quan immigrated here when he was younger. I was had parents who were immigrants, so we have like similarities but differences, and because of like the different, like I've gone through some of the stuff Quan has, and Quan's trying to like just starting to do certain things. So we had things happening as we were starting to shoot. Uh, for Quan, he was buying his first piece of property, which is like a big investment at the time, and we showed the stresses of being like a young person just trying to figure your life out. Be like, do I want to spend all this money to have a place where I put my stuff, or do I want to explore the world, or do I want to like figure that out? And then on my end of things, my father passed away back in 2020, and I was just about to sell the family home, which was really effing hard. And it was just one of those things where I didn't know. I was like, what am I doing? Like, I'm selling this and I'm gonna have a stack of money, and then I'm going to what, travel? I don't know. Like, this is
Mm-hmm.
blood money. And we were both going through our own personal stresses, and again, it was all. I sometimes think shooting documentaries is almost like accidents happening, and then you kind of find the accidents, and you go, "There's a story here." I think, um, and that's what kind of happened. We just had our own stuff going on, and Quan would be like, "We should shoot that," or maybe we should shoot this, and same thing would happen on his side, and we kind of just would piece it together as it goes. It is funny though. I think it's like in the end, the film is very close to what we had like pretty much what we initially pitched, though we had no idea it was going to be as well as it is, or as like cohesive as it is based on our own personal stories.
Oh, and another thing I want to say, Cecilia, I don't know if you kind of have had a through line as your story through line as you were making it, and then getting stuff for it. Like, oh, I gotta say something about this part of history, and then I go up. Like, for us, we didn't really know what the story was about, and I think that was a big learning experience to either work with writers or figure it out better, because we really waited till we wrapped shooting and then hope for the best. Or I think right before our last shooting block, I was editing like a rough cut together, and I even did it on a plane through to Vietnam when we shot a little bit. And then that story outline, it ended up changing so much, so we didn't really know what we were doing. But I don't know if that was the same for you, Cecilia.
Yeah, like I mean, it just depends. What you have an issue with is, I think every filmmaker wants to work that way if they have the money and not an infinite amount of money and time, because it's like an interesting way. Because when you're working on a film project, I think there's like all of these like tangent film projects that spoke out of them, and I think everybody would want to pursue them. But yeah, actually, I talk a lot about the process. My experimental filmmaking practice is something that spokes out of this experimental filmmaker in Toronto. His name is Phil Hoffman, and he has a big you know, a family tree underneath him or above him. I don't know how that works. Filmmakers in Canada who are part of his like filmmaking family tree, and I am one of them. And the process is basically to allow yourself to step into it without a preconceived notion of what you're going to make. And so I actually write the narration in all of my films at the very end after I've edited, picture edit. So it with the exception, I did actually make a feature film recently. So obviously that you can't, I guess you could, but it's an infinite amount of money at that point, right? When you bring in actors and
Hmm.
stuff and from other cities, etc. So it's not to say that every single one of my films is done that way, but I try to when I can. Um, and uh, to like the whole mechanism of the process is to trust that you're going to find the film. If you're honest in the process and if you're honest with what you're doing and you're true to yourself, the film will reveal itself. So an archive was actually made completely like that. I wanted to make a film about my father somehow. And while I was in the process of starting it, I had already filmed some of it. And then I realized I could not film him anymore. There was a certain point where ethically, I just realized it was not
Hmm.
possible to film anymore. And so, and then I had like left the whole summer. And then in the winter, I had been in another country. I was in Austria doing an artist residency there and basically spent my time editing this film. And while that happened, while I was editing, that's when the social movement in Chile happened. So it was like this event infused itself into my film when it was never really about that. And in the moment that it was happening, I knew that I had to respond to that. And I knew that my dad would want me to respond to that as well. So I guess it's a roundabout way to say that you guys are working in the process. So good on you.
And I think that answers my question about what is the power of documentary. Well, it's raw and it's fluid, and you find this story within the lives of people.
Yeah, like I
Awesome.
mean, it's for me personally, I have yet to I don't well, you know what, I did make a documentary once on Antro, who's like the Winnipeg poster guy. I'm not sure. I did make that one with the exception, which is the first time I entered into a process where I had no idea, like I didn't really know the subject at all prior to filming. I just like
Hmm.
this is an interesting
Just
thing
thrown right into the deep end.
and I was like, I've seen this guy around for a while. But with the exception of that documentary, for the most part, I don't really make any films that don't have anything to do with me personally. Like the content wise is all um, something that speaks to me, and all of my films build upon each other. I don't make these one-off films. I'm not the best business person when it comes to filmmaking, like unlike the guys at Farpoint Films. Like maybe I need to get them to like produce my next feature film. And maybe they would like get me more efficient or something like that. But I do manage to make a living off of filmmaking in spite of this. So I do think that there's something really powerful about honesty and making sure that for whatever reason you're making the film, whatever the subject is, that it is honest and you're doing it because you really need to be making that film
Hmm.
and not because you think it's a good idea that could sell to television. And maybe the guys at Farpoint have a different way, way of saying that, but I think they'll agree with me too.
Yeah, I also like
Awesome.
that. Um, I feel like with docs are the ones that I'm interested in making myself. Um, it's kind of stories that it's like I don't make stuff about big stories that everyone knows already, or like it's kind of always like a niche or like I made a short doc recently about a girl who was getting over her addiction to self harm, and I'm like, no one, like even I wouldn't have known about her if it wasn't for like documentary filmmaking or opportunities like this. So that's what I
Hmm.
like especially short documentaries, which I'm very fascinated with. It's like a piece of life that you're getting, and it's not something you already know. It's just, hey, here's a cool story, and you should really know about this.
This is kind of a two-part question. I'm not sure what other sorts of projects you've worked on in the past, but if you have worked with real actors and also documentaries, what are the pros and cons with, working with an actor for telling a story? Because I know docudramas are pretty popular right now with like the Elvis Presley movie, Rocket Man, Bohemian Rhapsody. The pros and cons of potentially working with actors versus working with real people.
I know personally, I like documentaries, not the thing I do regularly. So
Mm-hmm.
this is a kind of my first documentary feature. Um, I've done a couple of shorts with Kwan, and I've done a couple of shorts here and there. But like,
Mm-hmm.
uh, I think in general, I personally am a narrative filmmaker. I like control. I'm too much of a control freak, which is like I and that being said, I just love watching documentaries. I enjoy making documentaries, but it's a different world. It's a different stress
Mm-hmm.
level. I like being able to use my words to kind of create the scene. But that being said, you still use your words. It's just how to communicate and engage with someone to get them to give you the information that you sometimes need, or to activate the situation, or understand the situation, or understand what they've gone through, or some things like that. So it's layers of different communication, is how I see the difference. But truly, I think I'm more of a narrative person overall.
Mm-hmm. And I guess just between those two versions, how is it working with an actor versus working with real people in that situation? Is it harder or easier? What's that like?
Again, I don't think I think they're both different things. Like, I think they're both equally can be hard or difficult based on days. I've been in interviews where I'm like, this guy's giving me nothing. Why'd you say you wanted to be part of this, dude? And then I've had
Mm-hmm.
like times where you sit down and they just want someone to hear their story, and you're just like, Jesus, and like you're like, you know, and same with the other things with like actors. You have days where you're like, this guy's a trained actor and they're not giving me much, and you're trying to figure it out. It's puzzle piecing. Being a filmmaker is problem solving. It's just, and that's part of it. It's just different forms of it.
I'm a cinematographer by trade, and that's what I aim to do. But whenever I make my own films, I like to make documentaries as a director. And I just feel like, first of all, as a cinematographer, I work on both scripted and unscripted projects, documentary and narrative projects. I mean, and it's very intertwined, I guess. Like, I love my favorite films are things that look really natural and almost documentary, like Nomadland
Mm-hmm.
or Chloe Zhao's other movie, The Rider, which, you know, they're taking the documentary instincts and crafting it into scripted work. And like you said, a lot of docudramas are very popular right now. And the only short film that I've ever directed is called Container, and it's based on a true story as well. And I shot it like a documentary. I locked up all the actors in a U-Haul, made it a container, and put that operator and the sound person in there and lock them all up and make them shoot the movie. And it's almost like if I were to make narrative films, I would do it like that. Like I would create a scene and shoot it like a doc. Like we didn't have lights or stands or C stands everywhere. I built the lights
Mm-hmm.
into the set as a DP. I like that. Like it's almost like making a documentary scene out of it. But on the other hand, in a documentary, you're still approaching the story almost, I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
like I approach it almost like a narrative film where you have, as a cinematographer, I shoot it like, yeah, whatever, wide, medium, close up. But there's a shot in Seeking Fire, which is my favorite shot, is when we've just done a scene on Ian at his dad's place, and then our other camera guy Marcus was going out and shooting house B-roll, and I was in the backyard filming, and then Ian sat down on the steps of the backyard and started crying, and I put the camera down and I hit cut, and then I went over and hugged him, and I still think about it sometimes, like, should I have kept the camera rolling and go in and hug him, or did I make the right choice? Like I always
Yeah.
wonder that, and that's the blurred line between documentary and drama. I think like in a drama, probably I would have gone in and like shoot close ups or something. I don't know, but
Hmm.
as a documentary filmmaker, you also have that sense of sensibility and how far you're willing to go. Um, Anyways, long rant, but I work on both, and I really enjoy when the two mixes like together. Like tomorrow, I go and film, which would be part of a first feature for me as a cinematographer, and it's again docudrama, and it's a true story that repeats again, and I'm really gonna film it like a documentary with not much lighting, not much crew, and that's why I
Very
really enjoy
cool.
making.
Let's go around this circle real quick, starting with you, Cecilia, about the Gimli International Film Festival. Maybe some of your experiences with it before, and just your thoughts on having this festival in Manitoba, particularly hosted in Gimli, because we don't have like a Winnipeg film festival specifically.
Yeah, I'm one of those people that like I really don't haven't really submitted my films around to like I
Mhm.
focus on so I'm not sure if my films have really like I haven't submitted them to Gimli. So um I do think it's important. It just for experimental filmmaking and for the type of films that I make, not necessarily the best fit. I'd say I go for like fall and spring festivals, which are like a different kind of feeling when we talk about them. I do
Mhm.
think Gimli is great though for bringing local films, especially short dramas in particular. Have a really hard time getting placed in film festivals. Like it's like a black hole when you start working. Documentaries, it's not the same thing. They have a different landing point, but
Mhm.
short dramas in particular, people who are working in whatever, like comedy or they were working in live action forms. I think a lot of people, when they start making films, they go to that form and they gravitate to that form, and then they find out that it's incredibly hard to be programmed in comparison to like Quebec filmmakers who are making like a short film for $100,000, right? Like, I mean, it's just like the kind of budgets that you see, and you see the landscape going out. Like the people in Manitoba, like it would never occur to them to be that audacious, I think, with their films. And I think something like Gimli is really good for being able to provide, in particular, for space for dramas, in particular. And I know I have like a documentary film, but I think it's really great for that, and good for just bringing an opportunity for people to connect and have, maybe seeing that first or a second, having that local audience see your film is a really important, I think, milestone for a filmmaker, and especially when they're starting out. And I think that's a really great thing that Gimli does.
Awesome. Ian, what are your thoughts?
It's funny when I got out of film school, I was like, I gotta get into Gimli. It's the next biggest thing in my life. It's funny. It took forever to get accepted into Gimli. They kept rejecting me over and over again for some reason. But I eventually
Like,
got
really?
in. Yeah,
Okay,
I
wow.
know, I know. I'm like, I'm a local. I don't understand. But
You're like, yeah.
eventually, but I got in eventually. I think 20. Oh my God. I think 2016, it was my first time playing there. And I'll say like on a festival aspect, it's my favorite because it's usually the end of my festival run because it
Mhm.
circles back usually. Like I usually start submitting around like end of September, October, and then it circles back to like July where the movie's kind of done the festival run. And it's great because it's like the hometown vibe of like, you did it. I get to show it to my friends and family now. Um, it's always been like a cool atmosphere there. Like it's a very like relaxed festival in a lot of ways where I
Mhm.
feel like I can like joke around and just have a good time, but also see like good movies. Like I love a lot of the morning events and like the 48 hour film fest, the pitch, things like that. It's it is true. Like we don't have a lot of like we have movie screenings, we have certain things around Winnipeg, but it is like probably like one of the bigger festivals or film festivals specifically in Manitoba. Um, it's just a good time, and it's been funny as it was like a major bucket list for me for a long time, even though it's like in my city, and it took a while to actually get in.
Yeah. Awesome. Kwan.
I've been to it a few times in the past years, and I just really like that it's actually a festival for movies and for filmmakers and for movie seers. You know, compared to some of the ones I'm not gonna mention names, but that I've been to where it's clearly just networking, and you go to see a movie and no one's there, and then they ask you to come for Q&A. I'm like, what the, what's the point of this? No one's here to see movies. And it's all from networking. And Gimli doesn't quite feel like it. There's almost no networking there, but that's nice because you go there and you see your friends and you're like, hey, you're also seeing the movie. Cool. And then you kind of go to the ship and plow after. But, you know, it's really nice. I like that people are there to see movies or to see the pitches, to see contests. And the Manitoban shorts competition is always packed, which I love. Like, it's really nice to like play there, compete there, and see a bunch of people enjoying the movies.
Awesome. Well, just as a quick wrapper, how about we go around, starting with you, Cecilia, about just a little bit your name, as well as the film and where it's going to be shown at GIFF 2023.
So the film is called An Archive, and it is not screening as part of the official program, but it will be in the awards ceremony. I think it's on the Sunday in the afternoon with TBA films, I guess, depending on what else wins awards. So it'd be great to, I will be there. So if people have any questions or things like that, maybe I'll see the other guys there too, if they're award winners as well. Although I'm sure you guys are like, it's won awards and for greatness anyways.
I'm gonna win the award for best smile. That's my goal. Well, my name's Ian. Kwan's the other director.
Nice though.
All right, Ian Kwan. Our film is Seeking Fire. It's playing the Gimli Film Festival at 1 on Friday the 28th, and then 5:30 on Saturday, July the 29th. Check your local listing to the actual venue because I have no idea. But I will be there on the Saturday, but not the Friday. Kwan will be there, but I think I'm doing a Zoom interview.
Awesome.
Yeah, he said it.
Well, thank you, all of you, for taking the time to chat with me. It's always great to hear from local filmmakers, learn more about their process, and, you know, just celebrating film here in Manitoba. Enjoying the content from You Multicultural? Make sure you subscribe and hit that bell notification to stay up to date with everything that we're doing.